Over the next 2 years, life in Britain is going to change in ways most people aren't ready for. Not because of one big disaster, but because several major problems are about to collide at the same time. And what scares me most is how casually people brush it off. They say, "We've lived through worse. 2 world wars, recessions, the 70s, the crash of 2008, we always pull through." But this moment isn't like any of those. This time, we're staring at multiple breakdowns hitting together, each one making the others harder to fix, a chain reaction that pushes the country further down every month. And if you stay with me to the end, you'll understand why these next 24 months will decide whether Britain continues as a modern, stable nation, or slips into a slow, painful decline that future generations will remember as the moment everything started to fall apart. A moment when people will ask, why didn't someone speak up? Why didn't anyone act? The toughest truth is this: by the time the average person realizes how serious things have become, the damage will already be done. The time to get ready isn't one day, or when things get clearer. It's right now. If you want to stay ahead of what's coming, make sure you're part of this channel. UK Economy Explained. What I'm about to walk you through isn't fear-mongering or guesswork. It's a clear look at 6 major failures that are all hitting the country at the same moment, and once you see how they connect, the picture becomes impossible to ignore. Understanding what's ahead won't make the situation disappear, but it will help you prepare. First, though, we need to talk about something that slipped past the headlines last week, even though it should have been everywhere. Moody's cut the UK's credit rating again, down from AA to AA-. To most people, that sounds like paperwork. But it's not. A downgrade is the world's way of saying, we're losing confidence in your ability to manage your debts. And when that confidence drops, everything gets more expensive. Government borrowing, business investment, even long-term growth. Foreign money starts to hesitate. Global markets start to question whether Britain still has its financial house in order. This is the same country that once held the highest possible rating, the benchmark other nations were measured against. Now we're slipping step by step, while our leaders insist nothing's wrong. But something is wrong. A downgrade is the kind of signal you ignore at your own risk. And remember, this is just one piece of a much bigger problem. Because we're not facing a single challenge. We're facing 6 deep, structural crises that are piling on top of each other. None of them stand alone. Each one drags the others further down. So let's start with the first, economic stagnation. For almost 15 years, ever since the crash of 2008, Britain's economy has barely moved. Growth has been flat, wages have stalled, and productivity has refused to recover. This is the foundation everything else sits on, and it's crumbling. 4 years now, Britain's economy has been stuck in the mud. Our GDP per person has barely moved an inch, and here's the part that should make every working adult stop in their tracks. We are the only major developed country where take-home pay is actually lower today than it was in 2008. 17 years later, the average worker is worse off than before the financial crisis. That simply hasn't happened in modern British history. The engine that makes countries richer, productivity, has gone cold. We're now roughly 20% behind France and Germany. Think about what that means. A French worker gets 5 days' worth of output done in 4. We take longer, earn less, and fall further behind every year. And businesses have noticed. Investment in the UK is the weakest in the entire G7. When global companies decide where to build the next factory, research lab, or data center, they're picking places like Poland or Berlin, not Birmingham or Manchester. The money that should be rebuilding and modernizing our economy is flowing anywhere but here. Why does any of this matter? Because if an economy doesn't grow, nothing else works. You can't fund the NHS without growth. You can't pay state pensions without growth. You can't maintain transport systems, schools, or basic public services without growth. A country that stands still economically is a country quietly sliding backwards, and that's exactly what has been happening for more than a decade. It's been so slow and gradual that most people haven't noticed. Now let's move to crisis 2, our demographic crisis, the one almost nobody dares to discuss because it's bleak. Britain's birth rate has collapsed to 1.49 children per woman, far below the 2.1 needed just to keep the population stable. We aren't having enough children to replace ourselves. Some people shrug and say, well, fewer people means fewer pressures on housing. But that's completely wrong, dangerously wrong. The population isn't shrinking evenly. Younger generations are having fewer children, while older generations are living longer than ever. The balance between the young and the elderly is tipping at a pace the system simply cannot support. What this creates is a country that's getting older at high speed, with fewer working adults left to carry the load. Today, we still have roughly 3 people of working age for every retiree. By 2040, that drops to 2. And by 2050, we're on track for a near 1-to-1 ratio. Imagine one person's taxes trying to cover another person's pension, healthcare, and long-term support. It simply doesn't add up. The maths breaks long before the system does. We can already see this play out elsewhere. Japan's economy has been stuck for 3 decades because it aged before its income caught up. South Korea is in even deeper trouble, with a birth rate so low, 0.7, that its population is heading toward a collapse within a lifetime. And the uncomfortable truth is that the UK is walking the same path, just a decade or so behind them. People often say, well, immigration can fill the gap. But to keep our age structure stable, Britain would need around 1 million new arrivals every single year, forever. That isn't realistic. Voters won't accept it, and governments won't commit to it. Without that pipeline, the demographic equation fails. Now let's move to Crisis 3, our collapsing infrastructure. The country is literally wearing out beneath our feet. A third of all treated water never even reaches homes because it leaks out of pipes laid in the Victorian era. Water companies have paid out billions to shareholders while failing to modernize what they manage. We're now in a position where big cities could experience water shortages in the coming decade, not because we lack water, but because the network can't physically deliver it anymore. And it's not just water. Our road system needs around £14 billion in urgent repairs to tackle potholes and underlying structural issues. Councils don't have that kind of money. They're already cutting basics just to stay afloat. Britain's core infrastructure, the stuff everyday life depends on, is wearing down faster than we can repair it, and the bill for fixing it keeps growing while the funds keep shrinking. Our roads are wearing out faster than councils can patch them, and without a huge wave of investment, which no one is prepared to fund, large sections of the network will be barely drivable within a decade. And then there's the rail system. It's a mess from end to end. Trains are old, signaling equipment belongs in a museum, and the underlying infrastructure is decades past its prime. HS2 was supposed to be the big leap forward, the project that would drag Britain into the modern age. Instead, it's been cut back again and again, to the point where it may never reach the cities it was meant to connect. Meanwhile, other countries, France, Spain, Japan, China, have built entire high-speed networks while we argue over budgets. Our power grid isn't ready for the future either. If even a third of cars switch to electric over the next few years, the system will struggle to cope. We need new power lines, upgraded substations, modern generation, smart metering, the whole package. But the level of investment required simply isn't happening. Hospitals tell the same story. NHS buildings are literally falling apart. The repair backlog has blown past £11 billion. Roofs leak, heating systems break down, and operating rooms close because the building isn't safe to work in. This isn't a snapshot of a developing nation, this is Britain right now. When you let infrastructure rot beyond a certain point, you enter a trap. Everything becomes so expensive to fix that it feels impossible. So repairs get delayed, things degrade further, and the price climbs even higher. Several parts of Britain's infrastructure are already stuck in that spiral, and there's no obvious escape plan. Now let's turn to Crisis 4, social fracture. The country is pulling apart in ways that should alarm everyone. Regional inequality is now as bad as anything we saw in the 1800s. London and the southeast on one track, the rest of the country on another. The gaps in wealth, opportunity, and even life expectancy are widening every year. A child in Blackpool can expect to live a decade less than a child in Westminster, a 10-year difference inside the same country. That isn't what a healthy, developed society looks like. That's a nation failing enormous parts of its own population. And trust in the institutions that hold the country together has fallen off a cliff. Government, parliament, the police, the press, even the NHS. People feel abandoned, unheard, and unprotected. When people stop believing in institutions that are meant to protect and serve them, those institutions slowly stop working. Confidence collapses first, and the collapse becomes reality soon after. And the country is growing more fractured by the year. This isn't old school left versus right anymore, it's cultural, generational, regional. Leave versus remain. Young against old. Cities against small towns. Graduates against people who never went to university. Entire groups of citizens now live in separate mental worlds, with different values, different information, and almost no shared understanding. The social glue that helped Britain survive its darkest moments, especially during the war, simply isn't there anymore. Back then, hardship was met with a sense of unity. Today, if the economy takes a sharp downturn, there's no shared purpose to rely on. Just groups fighting over whatever resources they can hold on to. Crime paints the same picture. Violent incidents and shoplifting are rising fast. Police forces have been cut back for years, and detection rates for everyday crimes have collapsed. In many cases, the police don't even turn up. They hand you a reference number and move on. So people with money hire private security, while everyone else is left to deal with whatever happens. A two-tier system is forming in real time. Now let's talk about Crisis 5, energy vulnerability. Britain's energy position is far weaker than most people think. The North Sea, once the backbone of our energy independence, now produces only a fraction of what it used to. Output has fallen by around 75% since the year 2000, which means we rely heavily on imports to keep the lights on and the heating running. When European energy markets exploded in price during 2022 and 2023, our bills didn't just rise, they tripled. And because we're tied to global gas markets with almost no leverage, the government had to pour tens of billions into emergency subsidies just to keep households and businesses alive. That fragility is still there. Most coal plants are already shut. Our nuclear stations are old and heading toward retirement. Instead of having a balanced, reliable mix, we're leaning almost entirely on renewables and imported gas, a combination that leaves us exposed whenever the wind is weak or global markets spike. If the world experiences another energy shock, or if even one piece of our import infrastructure goes down, Britain could face real, physical shortages. Our emergency fuel reserves have been run down, we barely have any energy storage, and the entire system functions like a just-in-time supply chain. Everything has to go right, constantly. One disruption, and the lights start flickering. And here's the deeper problem. The clean energy transition itself needs enormous amounts of copper, lithium, cobalt, and rare earth minerals. Britain produces almost none of them. We depend on long, fragile supply chains, many of which run through China, for the materials needed to build solar panels, wind turbines, batteries, and electric cars. If those supply routes are disrupted for political or security reasons, our entire renewable strategy stalls overnight. Now let's move to Crisis 6, geopolitical isolation. Britain's position on the world stage has weakened dramatically in the last decade. Leaving the EU cut us off from our biggest trading partner. Trade volumes have slipped, European investment has declined, and what used to be frictionless access is now a maze of forms, delays, and added costs. Our relationship with the United States has shifted too. For generations, the special relationship gave Britain a privileged seat at the table of American power. But Washington is now focused on Asia, and Europe simply isn't its strategic priority anymore. The role we used to play, the bridge between the US and Europe, doesn't exist when we're no longer inside the European bloc. We've tried to build new trade ties with India, Australia, and other countries across Asia, but we're negotiating as a mid-sized economy that needs deals far more urgently than they do. That means accepting terms that are weaker, slower, and less beneficial than what we had before. And our military capability, once central to Britain's global influence, has worn down. The army is now the smallest it has been since the Napoleonic era. The Navy struggles to keep its ships in working condition. The Air Force is operating with aging equipment and falling recruitment numbers. A country that once projected power is now struggling just to maintain its basic commitments. All of these forces, energy fragility, shrinking alliances, and reduced military strength, add up to a nation that is far more vulnerable internationally than most people realize. Yes, Britain still has nuclear weapons, but when it comes to regular military strength, we're a faint echo of the force we were even 2 decades ago. Our cultural influence around the world is still powerful. British music, media, universities, language, that all counts. But soft power doesn't shield you when the world gets rough. And right now, global tensions are rising in every direction. Being both militarily thin and politically isolated is a very dangerous combination. Here's the part people really need to understand. Any one of these 6 problems on its own would be tough, but manageable. A slow economy. Hard, but fixable. An aging population. Difficult, but not hopeless. Failing infrastructure. Expensive, but within reach. Social division. We've lived through worse. Energy fragility. Scary, but solvable. Geopolitical drift. Challenging, but we could adapt. But when all 6 happen at the same time, and each one worsens the others, you don't get a normal crisis. You get a system that starts to break down from every angle. A weak economy starves the government of money to repair infrastructure. Failing infrastructure makes businesses less productive, which worsens the economy. A shrinking workforce means fewer people paying taxes, so the economic picture gets even darker. A divided society can't agree on the hard, long-term reforms needed to fix any of it. Energy insecurity pushes industries to relocate, causing even more economic stagnation. And when you're isolated internationally, foreign investment dries up, feeding right back into the same economic weakness. It's a feedback loop, a downward spiral, where every problem strengthens the next. And we're not heading toward it. We're already inside it. Let me show you exactly what this looks like in the real world, with a concrete, recent example. Northern Ireland's power grid came under extreme pressure last winter, and it exposed something the government already knew. The infrastructure is aging, demand keeps rising, and supply margins are tighter than they've ever been. Engineers warned that if the grid had tipped over the edge, restoring it wouldn't have been quick. Hospitals would have relied on emergency generators. Homes would have gone without heat in freezing weather. Businesses would have shut down. The economic damage could have been enormous. Now here's the uncomfortable truth. None of the underlying problems have gone away. The infrastructure is still old. Demand is still growing. Supply remains stretched. Experts across the sector say these risks are still with us, which means the system could face similar pressure again. And this isn't just about Northern Ireland. It's a warning shot for the rest of the UK. Many regions face aging power networks, energy vulnerability, and years of underinvestment. The signs are all pointing in the same direction. Look at council finances. Birmingham wasn't some freak event. It was the first major example of a national trend. Dozens of local authorities have issued warnings about severe financial stress. When a council becomes insolvent, it must legally cut everything except the most essential services. That means libraries closing, youth centers shutting, roads going unrepaired, parks deteriorating, social care squeezed to the legal minimum. Communities hit by this don't decline slowly, they decline fast. Young people move away first. Businesses follow. Tax revenue shrinks. The council cuts even more. More people leave. It becomes a doom loop. And if these financial pressures keep spreading, we could see parts of the UK hollow out, not overnight, but gradually, predictably, and painfully. Areas where opportunity dries up, investment disappears, and families with choices move away because they can't see a future there. This is the pattern analysts are warning about. It's not guaranteed. It's not destiny. But it is the path the UK is currently drifting toward, unless real solutions arrive fast. This isn't speculation anymore. Analysts say the early signs are already visible across parts of the former industrial North and Wales. Entire communities are struggling with the slow erosion of services, opportunities, and basic infrastructure. But let's talk about the timeline, because people always ask, when does everything finally break? The uncomfortable truth is this: we're not waiting for a collapse. We're living through the early stages of one right now. And most people can't see it because real collapse isn't a single dramatic moment. It's a slow grind, a gradual deterioration that speeds up year by year until one day you wake up and realize the country doesn't look anything like it did before. Here's what many economic and policy watchers believe the next 5 years could look like if current trends continue. 2026, the cracks widen, more councils buckle financially. NHS waiting times push further into record territory, forcing families into private healthcare even when they can't afford it. Energy bills stay stubbornly high. Real wages remain under pressure. Social frustration increases. Nothing explosively catastrophic, just everything getting noticeably worse. 2027, First major system failure, maybe it's a large-scale regional blackout. Maybe a water shortage in a major city. Maybe a critical transport network outage. The government reacts with emergency measures and big promises. But without the funding or long-term planning to fix the root causes, the public begins to understand something important. This isn't a temporary dip, it's structural decline. 2028 to 2029, the economic shock, a recession triggered by global instability. Or a homegrown crisis driven by debt, low productivity, and weak growth. Unemployment rises. Government borrowing costs spike. Austerity returns, but this time it bites into core services, not just extras. Families feel the pain directly. 2030 to 2032, social breaking point, more protests. More strikes. Possibly unrest. People lose trust in institutions. The political system becomes unstable. Governments struggle to survive full terms because any incoming administration inherits a system that's already stretched past its limits. 2033 and beyond, two diverging futures. Future A. Radical reform. The UK reinvents its economic model, overhauls its institutions, and begins a painful but real rebuild. Future B. Managed decline. The country settles into long-term stagnation, weaker public services, falling living standards, declining competitiveness, selective immigration to fill the gaps. A nation that once led the world becomes a middle-income country struggling to maintain what it used to take for granted. Between the two future paths, the harsh truth is that the second one looks far more realistic. Not because collapse is guaranteed, but because the kind of turnaround needed demands a level of unity and courage we just haven't seen in decades. Technically, the situation could be reversed. It would take a political class willing to take real risks, the kind of bold, uncomfortable decisions that hurt in the short term but pay off years later. It would mean rebuilding infrastructure on a scale we haven't attempted in generations, redesigning the tax system, reshaping pensions and healthcare, pushing productivity through serious investment, repairing ties with Europe, and making energy policy that isn't built on wishful thinking. That's the sort of national effort that changes a country's trajectory. But look at Westminster. Look at the culture around politics. Does any of that feel even remotely close? We can't even agree on what the problems are. Every idea is instantly torn apart. Every reform becomes a battlefield. Nothing big gets done. Meanwhile, the underlying issues keep tightening their grip. So what does an individual actually do with all this? Because understanding the problem is one thing, knowing how to protect yourself is another. Let me speak plainly. First, you cannot build your future on the assumption that the state is going to catch you when you fall. Not with pensions. Not with health care. Not with long-term care. If those systems survive in their current form, great, but plan as if they won't. That's not cynicism. It's simply looking at the numbers and being honest. Second, give yourself options. Real options. If you have skills that are valued internationally, start learning where else in the world you could realistically build a life. I'm not telling you to pack your bags tomorrow. I'm saying, know your escape routes. Know the visa rules. Know the demand for your profession. Don't let hoping things improve be your only strategy. Countries like Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and parts of Europe are actively trying to bring in skilled workers. They're not perfect, they have their own challenges, but they're offering something Britain isn't right now: clear paths, clear incentives, and clear demand. Of course, every country has its own challenges, but very few are dealing with the exact mix of pressures the UK is facing right now. And that's why personal strategy matters more than national optimism. Third, think carefully about what you own and what you can take with you. There's nothing wrong with owning property in Britain. But a house ties you to a single postcode and a single market. If circumstances change and you need to relocate quickly, you can't turn a semi-detached home in Birmingham into freedom or flexibility overnight. That's why portable assets matter. International stock exposure are skills that are valued in multiple countries, qualifications and experience that traveled professional relationships outside the UK. These are assets you can carry, no matter where life leads. Fourth, build personal resilience. We're heading into a period where power cuts, water shortages, and service failures aren't unimaginable, they're realistic possibilities. A small generator, a way to store water, a few weeks of basic supplies. This isn't doomsday prepping. It's the same mindset people used to have as standard common sense. Fifth, community is a survival tool. If the next decade becomes more unstable, strong local connections will matter more than almost anything else. People who know their neighbors, who cooperate, who share resources and look out for each other, get through crises far better than individuals acting alone. Sixth, protect your finances from being too UK-centric. Don't park all your savings in one banking system, one currency, or one jurisdiction. Spread the risk. Some exposure to stronger currencies or internationally stable assets can shield you if the pound weakens or the domestic financial sector struggles. This isn't about hiding gold bars in a bunker. It's about not being 100% vulnerable to UK-specific shocks. Seventh, prioritize your health while the NHS still has capacity. If you need treatment, don't delay. Waiting lists are rising every year, and routine procedures may become much harder to access in the future. Fix the problems you can fix now. A healthy body is one of the few protections that no economic crisis can take away once you have it. Eighth, if you have children, think about their future in a global sense. Languages, STEM subjects, internationally recognized exams, and skills that open doors abroad will give them the freedom to build their lives anywhere. In a world that's shifting fast, mobility is opportunity. Children growing up today will need skills and qualifications that allow them to work anywhere in the world, because the opportunities available in Britain by 2050 may look very different from the ones we take for granted today. And let me be absolutely clear, this isn't about wanting decline or predicting disaster, it's about looking honestly at the patterns in front of us. Everything I've discussed comes from publicly available data, official statistics, academic research, and measurable trends. None of this is speculation pulled from thin air. Could the UK change direction? Yes, technically it could. We could elect leaders willing to take difficult decisions, overhaul outdated systems, and invest heavily in rebuilding competitiveness. Nothing is impossible. But personally, I can't base my life on the assumption that political courage suddenly appears out of nowhere. I have to plan according to the most probable trajectory, not the most hopeful one. And the more likely path, based on current evidence, is a period of slow, uneven decline, interrupted by occasional shocks, until a major structural issue forces a reckoning. That breaking point could come from many directions. A debt problem or a major infrastructure failure, sustained economic weakness, or simply several small issues compounding over time. We don't know what the trigger will be. But we do know this. People who understand long-term trends and prepare early almost always do better than those who assume the future will look like the past. This isn't about pessimism. It's not about optimism either. It's about realism. And realism says that individuals who adapt, diversify, and stay proactive will have far more security than those who wait for someone else, especially the government, to fix everything for them. Britain is facing *6 interconnected crises, and there are no clear solutions, no long-term planning, and no political will to do what's actually necessary. That's not a recipe for stability. That's a recipe for national decline. The UK we've known for the last 75 years, a prosperous, stable, first-world democracy with rising living standards and dependable public services, that UK is ending. What comes next depends on decisions being made right now. But those decisions aren't being made well, and in many cases, aren't being made at all. You can't fix the NHS. You can't repair the pension system. You can't rebuild the infrastructure. You can't force the government to govern. But you can control your own preparation, your own planning, your own positioning for whatever comes next. So the real question isn't, is the UK about to collapse? The real question is, what are you personally going to do about it? Because the collapse isn't hypothetical anymore. It's already happening, just slowly enough that most people still don't see it. Don't be most people. Subscribe to UK Economy Explained for Real, data-driven analysis the mainstream media won't give you. We're not here to make you feel comfortable. We're here to make sure you understand what's actually happening, so you can prepare before it's too late. Your future depends on seeing clearly. The clock is ticking.